There's a fascinating exchange that happens quite late in Jesus' ministry, basically right before he enters Jerusalem for the last time on the day we sometimes call Palm Sunday. It involves Jesus, obviously, and his disciples, particularly James and John, two brothers who were a couple of his right-hand men. But the person who gets it going is actually James and John's mom. It's in Matthew 20, starting with verse 20. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons and, kneeling down, asked a favor of him. "What is it you want?" he asked. She said, "Grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom." Now, first of all, 10 points to Mrs. Zebedee for having the courage to ask this question, and 0 points to her two sons for putting her in this position. It's like asking your mom to go to your boss and ask her to promote you. It's crazy. Beyond that, though, don't miss the biggest piece of irony here. These two wanted to sit at the right and left hand of the king, which means basically to have the highest possible ranks in the kingdom. James and John wanted that kind of responsibility, but they weren't willing to ask for it on their own. So Jesus looks right at them, and he responds in verse 22. "You don't know what you are asking," Jesus said to them. "Can you drink the cup I am going to drink?" "We can," they answered. Honestly, poor James and John are not having a shining moment here. Jesus had just explained to the disciples, literally in verses 18 and 19, right before this, that he would be crucified and raised to life, all of his suffering and everything he was going to go through. He had just explained it all. And when he asks them if they can drink his cup, they say yes? It's almost blasphemy. But Jesus is very merciful and gentle towards them. Verse 23, Jesus said to them, "You will indeed drink from my cup." Now, interestingly, James and John were the first and last of the disciples to die. James was the first one to be martyred, and then John died of old age alone in exile. So yeah, they did drink from the cup of suffering. And Jesus goes on. He says, "But to sit at my right or my left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father." Lord Jesus, please teach us humility like you show toward your Father. Verse 24. When the 10, that is, the rest of the disciples, heard about this, they were indignant with the two brothers, which, frankly, is an indictment against the other 10 disciples. James and John were foolish to ask this question, and now the other 10 are mad because they didn't get to ask it themselves. So, verse 25, Jesus called them together, and he said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." You see, in the hierarchy of God's kingdom, the more you serve, the higher you are, and the higher you are, the more you serve. To quote one commentator on this section, greatness in the kingdom of Christ will not be attained by the persons who covet such exalted position, but only by those who forget themselves in their desire to promote the welfare of others. This principle is why human authority figures are often so far off, and it's why there will never be anyone greater than Jesus.